I would like to move on to the discussion. So first, I would like to ask Professor Ren. Professor Ren, hello.
Yes, yeah, sure. I can see.
As you can see, we have some achievements in transdisciplinary research, but there are also many, many challenges. So first, I want to ask your opinion about what you heard from Professor Saito and the students.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Dimitar. And because we have only very limited time, I will only say a very few words. First, I was very impressed by Professor Saito's talk specifically about the reform of the teaching at the university and in your program. I think to make students aware first of multidisciplinarity, then of interdisciplinarity, and finally of transdisciplinarity is extremely important. Our experience showed that if we introduce that too late in the university education, it is not very helpful and it's not very successful. I think it's very important also to have that already part of the undergraduate education. I know you have been focusing on the graduate education, but nevertheless, I think that's an important element. Second point that I would like to raise with you, Professor Saito, is the connection. I mean, what you said about disciplinary research in a transdisciplinary setting is not related on just insights into phenomena, but very often into relationships between various objects, either problem or solution oriented. And that already is a change in the normal disciplinary research. But then, as you pointed out, the interdisciplinary research needs to find a common language between the natural sciences, you are chemists, and maybe the social scientists and the humanities. And very often what we can see is that people are not aware of the assumptions that are behind all these different disciplines. And so we have a lot of discussions that go nowhere because we don't understand the language of each other. It's not just a language, it's a common understanding of the structure that we're looking at. I mean, if you look at chemistry, you look at molecules, physics, you look at electrons. If you are social science, you look at behavior. And so all of them are related, but sometimes they're difficult to make those relationships. And it takes an extra effort to do this. And then the third stage, transdisciplinary, where we also include knowledge from other sources. And that, of course, is, these knowledge items are either, as I said before, driven by experience or driven by interest or preferences, or driven by local knowledge that may be indigenous or maybe just living in a specific area, has its own structure. And I think it's very important to understand this structure, and that's where my catalytic form of knowledge came in, that we understand better what they can contribute and what not. And I think making students aware of that kind of different types of knowledge is very important, specifically under the Japanese context. And I would like just to mention, in Kyoto University, you have Norio Okada, one of your professors, who has done these kind of disaster universities in small towns. And they were really built in order to collect local knowledge on how to deal and to cope with community disaster. And it was clear that that kind of knowledge was very instrumental in making these communities more resilient. So that's something that I wanted to say to you, but I was, again, very impressed, Professor Saito, for what you're doing. And I think there's also a very good role model for other Japanese, but also for other universities around the world. Then to come to Sotaro, thank you again very much for your very good contribution. Also to make a link between, feedback simulation and more, let's say, policy-oriented movements. I think that's very innovative, something that I think I would congratulate you for doing so. My only, let's say, problem with your work is that you focus on two issues, and economic structure and cooperation and diplomacy. However, if you look, for example, at the recent war between Russia and Ukraine, neither the two are very important. So we had a lot of economic cooperation between the two countries, also between Europe and in Russia. And still, if you have a person who is trying to restore an empire, economic cooperation doesn't count. Actually, it's it's being calculated as a cost, and diplomacy apparently does not work. So in that sense, I think it's important to understand that you have only limited access to some of the key variables. And I think power is one of the variables that I think you underestimate. And what is related to power is called empire building, ideology, narcissism and personalities. All of that is also a very important factor. Now, you can't model all of that, I know, but I think it's important that you understand the limitations. And I think it's very good to have those feedbacks in the economic structure and in the diplomacy structure. However, be very much aware that that's only a very limited part of the complex relationships between politics, citizens, economy, and peace. Then coming to you, Shoko, on developmental psychology, thank you very much. I think this is very fascinating work. It's also, I think it's interesting to see that curiosity is also a biological factor. Some of the primates have curiosities, others don't. That's also interesting in terms of chimpanzees versus orangutans and others. So there's some work also on the behavioral side of animals about curiosity that you might want to use also for your development work with children, because then it's not just socialization, but it's also biological factors that run some of the developmental paths in children. Concerning your question about transdisciplinarity, I think that, for a PhD, because this is really, based on a disciplinary work, you could really postpone the transdisciplinary aspects after the dissertation. Otherwise, it gets probably too complex, too big, too large. And what I always say is that dissertations should be, a deep drilling, not a horizontal drilling. And also for your questions, I say on curiosity, I think if you really rely on psychology, of course, you can include the knowledge of the mothers, the knowledge of the caretakers and so on, but you do that already. That can help you also to interpret your data. But basically, I think a huge transdisciplinary approach is not necessary there. It's always nice to have, but it's not absolutely necessary. And I think if you continue the way that you have done, I think that would be really good. The last presentation about transportation and its impact on lifestyle, I think it's very interesting. I would think that, if you continue that, because it's a more historical perspective, now thinking about, replacing cars again by public transportation and by bicycles again, is interesting because it's a reversal of the trend that you put more motorization, less time for keeping distances. All of that was, the main drivers of transportation in the past. And we can see now a little bit of a reversal in terms of sustainability. And it's very interesting to see whether that reversal is actually happening or whether it's still just wishful thinking. And also, if electrification may be a solution in between the new transportation mode and sustainability requirements. So I think that was a very interesting topic also in terms of the evolution. And I believe an evolutionary perspective is very helpful here because in mobility, we do not have that evolutionary perspective very often. And so please stick to that evolutionary perspective, but think about the more recent developments, which I think are very interesting in terms of the reversal of trends that we have seen so far in all of history. Okay, I would like to, stick with this. I know we have only 5 minutes left. Sorry, it took more time than anticipated, but I just want to make those main messages to you, and I hope they're helpful for you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ren. That's really very helpful. So as you said, we have only very little time left, but still I would like to take some time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from students. The students, I think, are having some trouble doing the transdisciplinary research. So now it's a good chance to ask some questions to Professor Ren. Who would like to ask something? What are your biggest problems? Okay, Shoko-san, please.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Ren. It was wonderful comment for me, and it really encouraged me to go forward in my research. And my question is about setting like a goal set for the research, because normally when we follow the traditional research behavior, we just examine the things what haven't found being yet or something like that. But if we just like start the research from the goal, like social issue oriented, how do we evaluate this object is right or not? Can you just give me any tips or hints? Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Shoko. I think that's a very important question, because in kind of transdisciplinary setting, we'd like to reach a specific goal, and it's not just curiosity driven. However, I would also say it's justified to be just curiosity driven, especially if you make your PhD about curiosity. So that's even a stronger motivation to do that. However, you know, if you come at the end to say some very good recommendations of how to improve the structure that enables children to be more curiosity driven, and to see what schools can do not to destroy that link to curiosity, which some schools do, and specifically, you know, some old Japanese traditions are not very good in enhancing curiosity in schools, as you all know about that. And so to give some good recommendations about how to really enhance curiosity seeking in education. Because if you pointed out, children, you know, starting whatever is 1.5, start to be curious, and they start to look out for the unexplored, and that is, you know, really important. But what we can see in surveys, specifically among 8, 9, or 10-year-old, is that some of this curiosity has really been disciplined in schools. And so, and I think if we can get that possibility to really, you know, have more, let's say, curiosity-driven inquiries in schools, that of course would be a good recommendation. It could be a goal for your own research.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there one more student who would like to ask something?
Yes, Lee Yang Piu.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Thank you for your excellent speech. And I just have one question. And we all know that, like, government and the universities and big companies are responsible for making a better prosperity for our world. But what do you think? Which one is the best engine to pursue that kind of goal? And which one should act as the biggest power to gather all the strengths to chase for that?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much. There are 4 major actors in society. It's politics, it's the economic corporate sector, it's civil society, and I would also say science. And what you feel is that we need to do is to make sure that those 4 cooperate. I think neither one of the 4 can do the job for the transformations that we need. We can have a lot of good political initiatives, but if the economy doesn't go along, it's not going to work. If the economy is going to provide no sustainable services, they may get bankrupt if the politics don't support them. If civil society is pushing for something and the economy and politics are not going along, well, that's it. And the same thing with science can press, and specifically in climate change, we see that it's not enough. So what we really need is a really cooperation between the 4. And that is not so easy, because we, you know, specifically in the Japanese environment, you have a very strong emphasis on hierarchy and competition. And, you know, and so there's not so much emphasis on cooperation. And I think that's something where I would say, you know, as an outsider, I know I should not give Japanese good advice, but I believe that cooperation is something that needs to be fostered much more. And that should be between cooperation, between politics, and sometimes that has happened also in Japanese history, but also with civil society and with science. And then I think we can make the necessary step towards transformations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting discussion, but I'm afraid our time is up. So Yeah, maybe at the end, Professor Kuwajima, are you there? If possible, I would like Professor Kuwajima to say a few words.
Can you hear me?
He was the main organizer of this symposium, and he worked very hard on the concept of the symposium. So what is your impression? What do you think?
Yeah.
Satisfied?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much.
梶原先生、ミュートです。
いや、多分聞こえますか？大丈夫？ Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. But you have the mute sign on.
Okay.
なんかミュートになってます。
Yeah,
but I think Sato is next to him, so
another.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Closing remark?
Closing remarks, yes.
Yes, okay. Oh, yeah. Just short closing remarks. Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending the 11th Kyoto University G-Size International Symposium. We especially thanks Professor Ren and Dr. Sakamoto for giving us valuable suggestions. And we can learn the transdisciplinarity and transformative knowledge system deeply, and also can recognize occurring drastically changes around science and technology policy and university policy in Japan. Through this symposium, we can also believe that transdisciplinarity or transdisciplinary research and education will become more important in near future. So we hope the common knowledge for transdisciplinarity will be widely shared, not only in Japan, but in the world. So in addition, finally, this is most important. I'm looking forward to generating some kinds of collaboration between Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies, IASS, and Kyoto University G-Size. Dankeschön, Professor Ren. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome, and we're very happy to have more cooperation with you. We're looking forward to that.
Okay, thank you very much. So as a moderator, I would like to apologize that we exceeded the time a little bit, but I think it was worth it. I enjoyed very much this symposium, and especially the interaction between Professor Ren, Dr. Sakamoto, and our students. Unfortunately, the time is always limited. It's not enough always, but I hope to keep this connection in the future, so our students can have access to some excellent advice of Professor Ren and Dr. Sakamoto in the future too. So let's give some applause in the end to our keynote speakers. And with that, I would like to close this international symposium. Thank you and good evening.